The reason why I tell this story isn't to convince anyone to do what it is that I did. If anything, the opposite, but more so to paint the picture of the entirety of the costs of pursuing my life's aspiration, having gotten rid of my job and let go of everything in pursuit of this dream that I wanted to bring to fruition, which was writing. And I think many people have things that they know that they want to do, or they just know that they don't want to work the current job and have the current life that they're living. And so I made a bold jump, but I'm telling this story to paint the picture of the costs because I didn't get anything that I wanted, but I did get what I needed. I got one thing that was what I needed. So it began at the end of a summer of celebration, and I had a compulsion to write a book. And the reason why I had a compulsion to write a book is because I had viewed writing as something that was my life's calling. I'd been viewing writing as my life's calling for the past 7 years up to this point, and it's fascinating because I have people who tell me things like, you're really lucky to know what your passion is. You're really lucky to have heard your life's calling. You're really lucky to have a purpose in life. But I've only realized this recently, but the misunderstanding between me and people who say these type of things is that I don't think they realize that I'm the one who put it there. And I think of it in terms of there's the love of God. You love God. Below that is love of friends and family and enemies and strangers as much as you can manage it. And then below that is a pinnacle that I would call love of purpose. And there's freedom involved. I would say that you need to put something in there that's at least potentially redemptive and good. But for the most part, I think that you can put whatever you want there. And I just so happened to put writing in there, but because writing is what I've put in there, I'm pursuing it I'm putting my whole life behind pursuing it. But it could have been anything. And the reason why I put writing in there is because I started writing in college. I wrote when I was a child, but I came back to writing in college after I stopped playing football. And there was a several month period of not having purpose. And because I didn't have any purpose, my mind was very loud. The thoughts in my mind were very loud. And it was pretty much just noise in terms of it was like there were multiple thoughts happening at the same time, and so I couldn't discern any one of them. And so it was just chaotic noise in my mind all of the time. And so that came about because I was without purpose. I was empty, and it's like idle hands are the devil's playground. My mind was idle. My hands were idle. I didn't have anything to run my motor against. And so after being in this state for several months, I pick up a pen and a paper and I begin writing. And if for no other reason other than the fact that it's free, I didn't know what else to do, and I was empty, and I was like, let me write my thoughts onto a paper. Just literally whatever is dictated from my mind to my fingers and onto the page, I'm going to put that on the page just because it's out of necessity. I don't know what else to do, and my mind is in chaos. I have to do something, and this is free. So I start writing, and as I write, in the action of getting my body involved with understanding my thoughts and seeing my thoughts go onto the page, they stop being an abstract thing, and they start to be a tangible thing that I can see in front of me. And it gives me a little bit of relief. It gives me a reprieve that I hadn't had in quite a while. Honestly, before I stopped playing football, because my life had been going down the improper path, and so the noise had been building up for a long time, but it had just become deafening when I didn't have any purpose in my life. And so writing gave me reprieve, and I also saw that it was endless possibility, meaning there's infinite amount of things that you can write about, an infinite amount of ways that you can write about any given thing. So I was like, oh, this is good. This is good, not in terms of, it wasn't like an elation, a feeling of elation, like when you're playing football and football is incredibly intense and it's synonymous with a battle, and you've got people that are kind of like your brothers on the field with you, and you're going to battle against another team, and it's incredibly intense. And even the same thing when you're at bat with playing baseball, there's so much pressure on one moment, and the highs are very high. But with writing, there wasn't that sort of elation. It was just, and I mean this in the best way possible, but it was just like I found myself lost in the present moment while I was writing. And maybe to say lost in the present moment isn't completely accurate, because the present moment is where you're supposed to be. It's almost like I had been exiled from the present moment, and I had let go of everything else, realized, oh, what I'm doing right now is good. I can get lost in writing. I can be lost in the present moment again. And so I was at peace. Wasn't living in the future, wasn't living in the past. I was at peace. Plus, writing is endless possibility. So I knew that I could do it for the rest of my life in theory, because it would never be exhausted. And it was partially because of the darkness that I was in, but it was at that time that I was like, I don't know very much about life, but one thing that I do know is that I should never stop writing. I should never stop writing for as long as I live. But I didn't view it as a hobby, and it might just be because of the type of person that I am, but I'm not really interested in having hobbies, because I think of a hobby as something that you like, but it's not important. A hobby is something that's only important insofar as you like it, but it would stop being important if you didn't like it. But for me, I didn't see writing that way. I was like, writing, I like it and it's important. It's not important because I like it and it's important. So it was at that time that I put writing in this pinnacle of purpose and importance. And the problem with doing that is, again, when people say like, oh, you're lucky to have your passion, you're lucky to have your purpose, the problem with putting anything in that place of the love of this thing that you're designating a gift from God, your beautiful burden in life, the problem with putting something there is that still had to perform well at university. After I graduated university, I had to get a job and support myself financially. And so it put me in a existential crisis all of the time, because I have this thing that I'm designating my life's calling, the reason why I'm on this earth, and I chose it, yes, but I did chose it, and I'm saying it. So I want to believe that is true, but I'm putting 15 hours a day into work and 1 hour a day into writing, so my actions aren't really saying that it's actually true. My actions are saying that I'm basically giving lip service to the fact that writing is my purpose, because I'm watering my financial stability. I'm watering this job that I'm working. I'm putting 1 hour a day towards writing. It's the math doesn't add up. For me to call this my life's purpose at that point, it divided me it created this existential crisis because the nature of life and time is that life is short. And so if you have something that you are calling your life's purpose, yet you're not putting the most amount of time to it, the proper amount of time into it, then you are lying to yourself, and you need to either remove that thing from the pinnacle of purpose or actually put your whole being behind pursuing it and bringing it to fruition, or just call it a hobby. But I was never willing to call it a hobby. It's not a hobby. So the issue with having that existential crisis is that as time moved forward, I was able to balance working a job and writing. And I would write in the morning before work, but I was telling myself that I'm working this job so that I can come back to writing and pursue this with all of my time and energy and freedom. So I was actually working a job in order to gain freedom, but the contradiction is that I was actually losing freedom. It's like, well, what do you mean? How are you losing freedom? A cataclysmic thing started to happen, and somebody might hear this and be like, well, you're just weak. You could have imposed your will upon your life and made changes. And it's like, no, I tried to do that. And the situation is that after working for the job that I'm referring to for 4 years, my day towards the end of it started to be wake up, and I knew it was wrong at the time, but I couldn't stop, and the noise was back in my mind and my thoughts were too loud. And I was like, the moment I woke up in the morning, I picked up my phone, scrolled on social media to escape the noise within my mind. Then I would go write, and that was my time of peace. And then after I wrote, I would go to work, and we were selling, dealing. We had performance expectations, dealing with frustrated clients, dealing with all sorts of fires that we have to put out. So it's incredibly cortisol invoking. And so my cortisol gets ramped up throughout the day. I don't have peace, and then I go to lunch. And whereas earlier in my career I would have been working out, training, pouring sweat during lunch, I was going to the gym still, but I was mainly walking around the gym and listening to podcasts, because once again, trying to escape the noise in my mind. I had no peace. I was afraid of silence. I was trying to escape myself. And then before I would go back to work, I would smoke a cigar because I justified it by saying that I deserved it. Go back to work, more deals, more selling, more performance expectations, more cortisol. Leave work having barely eaten anything at all during the day. Go to a restaurant because I'm making good money. I deserve it. Once again, I deserve it. Let me have a little bit of relaxation at this point. I'll have an old-fashioned. Wait, no, I'll have 2 old-fashions. And then I leave the restaurant at about 9 o'clock, smoke cannabis to dissolve the ego that the alcohol inflated. And then I go to sleep, wake up, and do it all again. So that was my day, and I tried to get out of that cycle, but every negative aspect of that day that I'm highlighting there, all the things that aren't good, they kept getting worse. They kept getting worse as time moved forward, and I was like, let me remove this, let me change this, let me work out in this way. And I kept trying to shift things, but it was like, as time kept moving forward, because I was in this cycle, I couldn't make changes. I was losing my freedom, losing my autonomy, and my habits were all just getting worse all of the time. So I was like, and it was all because of this dissatisfaction. I had no satisfaction from my job because I wouldn't allow myself to have satisfaction from my job, because I only wanted satisfaction from writing. And you could be like, whoa, you could have balanced them, or you could have derived satisfaction from your job. But that's the nature of having this pinnacle of purpose while not putting time into it. There was a contradiction happening within me, because the work I told myself was a means to get freedom in order to pursue my aspiration of writing. But my subconscious was yelling out to me, it's like, when are we going to actually pursue this thing? We're getting older. Time is not slowing down. When are we going to actually pursue the thing? We're going further away from it. And I was going further away from it, and because my habits were getting worse, there was something inside of me in this deep division that I was sabotaging myself. And whereas in the previous years I'd saved up quite a bit of money, I had now depleted almost all of the money that I'd saved up, because again, it's hard to explain, but it's like a self-sabotaging thing where I was like burning the boats. I was like, no, leave. My subconscious was like, no, leave this job, go pursue your aspiration. And you had initially said that this job was going to make you money so that you could pursue it. That's not happening. And so my subconscious just started burning the boats, and I couldn't even hold on to money. And so I'd had more money in the past in order to pursue this aspiration of writing. But now at this point, there could not have been a worse time to leave my job. But there would also never be a better time to leave my job because of the direction that I was heading. So it's a Sunday night. I call the individuals who are on my team. I let them know what I'm going to do. They support me. I email the leaders within my company whom I respect. And that's a Sunday. Come Monday, I'm not at the company anymore. So now I have crossed over. I have made the leap. I have the ability to pursue my life's passion, this thing that I'd always wanted to pursue for the past 8 years. But like I mentioned, I had depleted all of my money, and so the amount of money that I have when I quit my job is enough to make my mortgage payment in 2 weeks, enough to make the mortgage payment in the month after that, and then $500 to live off of for that entire duration. So basically I've got like 2 months to write a book, or fall into absolute financial cataclysm, and I don't have a plan B. I just had to make this decision. I had to make this leap. And I was in a state of trembling of cortisol from working the job in that day that I described, that typical day. And when I left, it's not as though the cortisol went away. It was almost like I was trembling even more. I was even more anxiety ridden. So I've got 2 months to write a book, and I'm like, all right, let me be reasonable with myself. Let me be courteous with myself. I'm a human being. I need to make money. I need shelter and food. So just to be very real, if I could make money from this book so that I don't have to I'm walking towards a cliff right now. If I don't have to fall over the cliff and drown in financial disaster and almost certainly go into homelessness and starvation, because I don't see another option at this point. If I could make money from this book, then that would be good and courteous with myself. So it's like, well, how can I make money from the book? Or even write a great book, the book that I'm most capable of, and then maybe somebody will see that and be like, well, I want to actually pay you in advance for the previous book. So I don't know how any of that's going to happen, but I'm like, well, let me just be courteous with myself and not clearly walk off this cliff. So I'm like, well, a publisher is not going to work. Me and a publisher aren't going to resonate with each other. The things that I write about, they're not going to know what I write about or why. I mean, I could tell them, I could show them, but it doesn't really make sense, I think, and it probably makes sense to an audience, but it's not commercially viable. And so a publisher wouldn't work. But I'm like, well, there are people on the internet, so let me Let me go on the internet, start making videos about what I think and why I think that way. And maybe people will hear that, they'll resonate with the things that I'm saying and be like, yeah, I want to read this guy's book. So now it's October when I leave my job, and right away I have this aspiration to balance the two things, creating videos and writing the book. I'm doing both, 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day in the morning, writing the book, working out in the middle of the day, the whole back half of the day making videos, trying to do everything at once. And I'm doing that for about 2 months, and at the end of the or for about 1 month, and at the end of the 1 month, there's essentially nothing to show for it regarding the book. There's no scenes, there's no chapters, there's been no progress. And the only thing worse than the book is the videos, because I was way in over my head, and I realized right away, like, oh, this is a whole separate endeavor. I know nothing about anything regarding videos. Plus, my intentions were wrong, so I was overcomplicating it. And so there was no progress happening anywhere. There was only deterioration, which is every day I'm marching forward towards financial destruction. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to get foreclosed upon, have starvation, and I don't see a solution. And I'm putting everything behind it. My whole house is a creation center. I've got 3 whiteboards hung up in my house, and in my living room I took my TV down, 3 whiteboards hung up. The first one is the plan for the book and the chapters and the planning as I go. The second whiteboard, the one in the middle, is my daily schedule, weekly schedule. Third whiteboard is the plan for the videos and how to go about even making videos, because I have no idea what I'm doing with that. And so I'm doing everything, but no progress happens. And then something significant happens that I thought might be the saving grace at the time that renewed my practical faith, but it wasn't the saving grace. It was helpful. It was certainly helpful, but it wasn't the saving grace. And it's basically that somebody else I knew left the company. They mentioned their 401k. I remember my 401k, but I assume that I have maybe a few $100s in there that'll get me through the month without starving, that I could pay my mortgage and eat without starving while I write this book in 2 months, despite the fact that no progress has happened to this point. And I go into my 401k account. When I look at it, I close my laptop like I've just seen a briefcase full of money. I look around, I leave the coffee shop where I was at, I go back home, I open it again, and it was basically enough money that I could have 5 to 6 months of runway. So it wasn't an absurd amount of money, but I was certainly going to pull it out because I didn't even remember that money existed. I wasn't banking on that money for any other reason. I was like, nothing matters except writing this book. Any accounts that can help me write this book, let's get those accounts involved. But I have to wait a month because I need it to be the new year for tax purposes before I pull it out, or I'll have a bigger tax hit than what would be intelligent. So I commit to creating videos because I'm like, oh, this has been a blessing. Now I can really use this 6-month period to have like a full runway, get my plane off of the ground in regarding these videos, less about the book, more about the videos. That way I can build it. I can find an online audience who would want to read the thing that I write, and I'll have a full 6 months to do it. I can definitely do it in 6 months. So another month passes, and after that month passes, I am able to pull that money from my account. I am holding on to that money. I'm incredibly frugal at this point because I had been teetering on, I wasn't eating much food until I got that money. But now at this point, I still have made no. I've got like maybe one scene, like the seed of a chapter for the book. And that's in a 2 month time period. The videos, I'm just lost in chaos with the videos. The videos are basically nothing. That's like a whole different endeavor that I've just inadvertently picked up when my intention was to write a book. And then the true significant event happens. The actual saving grace, the thing that certainly would not have seemed like a saving grace occurs, which is that I became sicker than I've ever been in my entire life. So right at the time that I was able to get that money, I became sicker than I've ever been in my entire life, and I can't get out of bed. And I forgot to mention that my hot water heater went out, so I have to take a shower at the gym. So at this time of being sick, the only reason why I'm getting out of bed is to go to the gym. And I'm not able to eat. I've got a fever over 100 all of the time. I can't watch TV. I can't write at this point. I can't do anything at this point. The noise that I've been referring to that is in my mind, now it's pure chaotic and like a painful noise that I'm dealing with. And whenever I close my eyes, I'm spinning. And then a fascinating thing happens, which is Saturday night comes and I become healthy because I'd been going to church for about 3 weeks at this point for the first time in 15 years. And then I'm healthy enough to go to church again on Sunday. And then on Sunday night, I fall back into the illness. But so I was healthy for like one day and then I'm sicker. Now this is really the worst I've ever been. And several days pass, 3 days pass, 2 days pass, and on the third day, my fever is bouncing from 101 to 102. I am really, I'm actually worried about my livelihood. I'm like, well, I'd never go to the doctor, but now at this point I would go to the doctor, but I don't have health insurance because I quit my job, obviously, so I can't go to the doctor. So I'm just writing it out, and I'm completely bedridden. Every time I close my eyes, I feel like I'm lost out in pure black ether, spinning around. Like my head is the focal point of which my whole body is just spinning around out in the middle of darkness. My fever is bouncing up to 102 constantly, but I can't pour sweat. I have cold chills all of the time. Anything that I put into my body and try to eat, I vomit it up, food or water. And this too is just typically not something that I would do, but I even reach out to one of my friends and I'm like, hey, I'm sorry to do this, but would you please bring me cold Gatorade? Is there any way you'd be willing to bring me cold drink? Because I don't have any cold drink at my house. I'm really hot with a fever right now. And he brings me Gatorade or something plus medication, over-the-counter medication. And that's on the third day. And then later that night, I go into a dream state. And I've been teetering on this dream state all of the time. During my sickness, I'm not going into REM sleep, but I'm like, I'm like kind of in a lucid dream all of the time. Like my eyes are closed and a bunch of time will pass, but I know at no point am I fully asleep. And then on this third night, that's kind of what's happening as well, where I know my eyes are closed, but I can't tell if I'm awake or asleep. And then I find myself in my room and it's completely black. It's silent. It kind of feels like everything is dead. Like there's even the noise of the fan, but somehow it just seems like an inanimate object. Everything seems inanimate. And there's a glass wall in front of me, a window in front of me, and I can see myself sleeping in bed. I can see myself sleeping in bed, and there's something, and I know in this moment that there's something that I need to tell the aspect of me that is sleeping in bed, but I can't get his attention. I don't have the ability to speak. I'm behind a glass wall, and I actually don't even know explicitly what I need to tell him. I couldn't put it into words, I couldn't articulate it, but I need to convey something to him. And it is, I could intuitively sense it at the time, but I was like, this is the only thing that matters. Like, I've been designating certain things as important. Like, I'm trying to create videos to garner attention online in order to make money, and I need money because I don't want to fall into financial cataclysm, and I don't want to fall into financial cataclysm because I'm afraid. So all of these things were cycling around in my intentions, and this thing that I needed to convey to the individual who was me, who was laying in bed, wasn't any of these things, but it was the most, it was the only important thing that there actually is. I needed to convey something that was um, consequential for my soul, is what I would say. And behind this window, the way that I could describe it is I felt like I was in the place of death, and but I couldn't get his attention. And so it was a panic, but then I wake up. I wake up and I'm in my bed. There's a pond of sweat. I've broken the fever. And in that moment, I remember the dream. I remember the fact that I had the dream. And that part of me that woke up couldn't articulate what needed to be conveyed either, but I knew what needed to be conveyed, as though I'd integrated the individual who was in the place of death behind the glass wall. And the best way I can describe what needed to be conveyed is that the moment I woke up in a pond of sweat, I go out into my living room, I erase all of these whiteboards, everything gone from the whiteboards. At the top of the middle whiteboard, I put a cross. Black marker, put a cross. And below that I put music in a garden, which is what became the title of my book. That was the working title. And I knew nothing mattered except for writing this book. I knew in that moment that the the aspect of me who was behind the glass wall in the dream was something like my true self. And my true self, the best version of myself, who I really am, was in the place of death. My soul was dying, and I had something that I needed to do, and it doesn't really matter what it is that I needed to do in regards to, mine was writing. It could be anything for anybody, but you can choose it, and I chose writing. But I wasn't putting my entire being behind it. I wasn't actually pursuing it to the best of my ability. And so I was lying to myself. So I was like, nothing really matters except for, you've designated writing as your life's purpose. You could have chosen anything. You chose writing. Put your life behind it. Put your whole being behind actually doing your best. And you can't fake it either. You can't fake doing your best. You'll know if you're lying. Quit trying to be sneaky. Quit trying to do both things, which is to write a book and be a writer. But do you really want to do those things because you want to gain attention? You want to be admired by people? You want to make money? You want to have a certain sort of freedom? Or do you want to write a book because you want to write a book? Okay, well then focus on nothing else except for writing a book. So that happens in January, and from that moment onward, I am all hours of all day, except for the peace in the middle of the day of working out and scorching away my intentions. I'm writing in the morning. I'm writing in the back half of the day. I'm doing nothing except for writing a book, because I know that when this time period ends and I reach this place of money running out, there's going to be no doubt that I did everything I can to bring the best possible book to fruition. And if I go into financial cataclysm, at least I'll have been somebody who written a book. So time starts passing, and I can say that right there, but it's a marathon. Every day I have doubts in my mind, like, dude, you're going to You're going to starve. You're going to be broke. People are going to judge you. You're going to lose friends. You are going to XYZ. You're wasting your life. You're doing the wrong thing. You're not worthy of writing a book. It's not going to be a good book. You're not even worthy of doing what it is that you want to do in this world. You are not free. So it's whatever. Whatever negative thoughts are coming into my mind constantly, all day, every day. And my reaction is keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. It's like, well, okay, all of those thoughts can exist, and those thoughts were thoughts of inadequacy. I'm inadequate, or I felt myself to be inadequate. I'm not good enough. And that's not even the issue of seeing myself as not good enough. The issue is that I was afraid of inadequacy. I was afraid of inadequacy, and then I had epiphanies, and I was like, dude, it doesn't matter. You might be inadequate. You might not be good enough. Who cares? Is that going to change what it is that you're doing, or are you going to still write? Because the fact of writing this book, that was the why that washed away. None of the hows, whatever it took to make it happen, none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered is bringing to fruition the book. So months and months pass, and I'm contending with those thoughts every day. It's a marathon, and there was not one day where it became easy. There was not one day where I had to let go every single fear inside of me. But as I kept moving forward, I reached the point where I would set time frames, and I would try to hold myself accountable, and I wouldn't hit all of the time frames that I was aiming for, but I was like, I was the employer and the employee, and so the employee aspect of myself would be like, all right, this is why I did not hit that time frame. This is why I did not hit that deadline. This is my plan to correct it. So I would try to be a good employer and set good, meaningful goals and hold myself accountable to deadlines. But I'll also try to be a good employee and try to bring those goals to fruition as best as I was possibly capable. And if I didn't hit the deadlines, I had to give myself a plan as to how I could hit it in the future. And something happens then about 4.5, 5 months later. I'm not doing any videos. I'm only writing all day, every day. I have a deadline to finish editing the final chapter on X date. That date comes in around noon on a Thursday. I completely finish editing the last chapter. The book is done. The book is done, and it was amazing. It was a great moment, but it was bittersweet because I was like, all right, well, now I'm... Whereas I'd been so afraid to begin at the beginning for multiple reasons, fear of inadequacy, excuses as to why it didn't make sense, then I had become obsessed over it over that time period, and I loved it. It was one of the best experiences of my life. It was so hard and arduous, but it was one of the best experiences of my life, and I didn't want it to end, and it ending would mean that I would have to go back into this place of financial worry and deal with the practical issues that I'm facing in my life, and I didn't want to deal with any of that. So part of me, I was like, well, let me not release this book, because it could certainly get better. I could improve the climax. I could make it more... I could just make it better. And if I made it better, that'd be good, because the book would be better. And while I'm dealing with all of these real world issues that have built up now, I will have the joy of getting to edit my book while dealing with these real world issues. But then I had another epiphany, and it was the final epiphany, and I was like, okay, I didn't write this book for money. I did not write this book for attention, because if you want those things, the issue is that, like the issue with the dream, what I was trying to convey to myself and bringing forth my true self while I was in the dream, and I knew that was of dire importance. The issue with intentions of wealth and attention and things like that, one, they're not good, but two, they're so trivial compared to it is of dire importance to bring forth your true self and the best version of yourself. And at the end of the day, yeah, you're a human being, be courteous with yourself, but the pursuit of wealth and attention are trivial because pursue first the kingdom of God and everything else will be given to you. If you're trying to create something beautiful, if you're trying to create art, and within your intentions are the desire for money and the desire for attention, it corrupts the art and it's just a waste of energy. So I'd removed all of that from my intentions, but now I'd come full circle and I was like, but I did do this for other people. I did this for myself, but the reality is that I've read so many books, I've read so much, and even listened to podcasts and things like that where it has pivoted the direction of my life. It has shined a light in my life from these strangers who I have never met, I'm never going to meet, and yet they've somehow been a light in my life. And it's like, I want to reciprocate that to other people, if only because I'm so grateful that it's been done for me. So I'm certainly going to release this book right now. And not only am I going to release this book right now, I'm going to make it as readily available as possible. I'm going to stand on it. Yeah, I've got thoughts of inadequacy and the fact that I'm not good enough and things like that. And thus that translates to my story as well, that my story is not good enough. But despite the fact that I have those thoughts, I'm going to stand on this story that I've written. I'm going to read it and put it online for free. I'm going to put it straight onto my YouTube, read every chapter, scroll through the pages. That way they can read it or they can hear me read it. But whether somebody thinks it's high quality or low quality, at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. That's out of my control. But what is in my control is making it readily available for anybody who could possibly benefit. So that's what I did, and now here I came back full circle, and I put it on YouTube, and I made it as readily available as possible, and now it's completely finished, and I was at peace, and I'm at peace, and I've got the confidence of having written a book, and I am, at this point, I was at a spot where now I've got just enough money left to pay the mortgage that's due in 2 weeks. I've got enough money to pay the mortgage due the next month and the $500 to live. So I found myself in the same spot as when I began, but the good thing is at least I'd written a book. At least I had produced fruit. I had become somebody who could produce fruit. And because I produced fruit, I knew that I was able to do it again. And so if I could make it out of this next financial cataclysm that I have now reached, which is the same place as where I began, then I'll get to write another book.